D'Angelo Russell has some serious footwork skills. That part's obvious. But the mechanics behind the footwork, the angles, the movement sequences, the setups, not so obvious. He's got some of the most subtly brutal footwork in the league, and now he's got a signature shoe. So let's break down what makes D'Lo's movement so uniquely special, and let's see if the way of way D'Lo 1 actually fits his style, or if it's just an above average basketball shoe with his name on it. So when you look at Russell on court, it doesn't look like anything like overtly crazy is going on, as in the case with someone like, let's say, Nikola Jokic. And yeah, I'll get to him in another video because that's a whole other thing. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that video, because every time I go back and watch his footwork, I find like some new fascinating rabbit hole to go down. Whereas D'Lo, you really have to pay attention to see how he creates separation and gets himself into position. The first thing I think most important with his footwork that kind of separates him from others is internal versus external rotation. So if those who don't know, Russell is a lefty, which inherently causes some issues for people not used to guarding lefties, so he gets a tiny advantage there. I mean, if you're in the NBA, you probably figured out how to guard a lefty, but it still throws enough people off, just enough, enough of the time. The thing about his footwork is his left foot does like 90% of the work in terms of misdirection, and his right foot does about 90% of the work in terms of power, which all comes down to, like I said, internal versus external rotation. So watch the way his left foot opens up. He's constantly angling it out or externally rotating it just enough to keep you or the defender guessing. Because when you externally rotate like that with your foot off axis to the rim, that's the part that can freeze a defender. They don't know if you're driving, pulling up, or pivoting, especially if you keep moving it and kind of subtly making little changes. And sure, other players do this too, but what makes Russell different is that he can hold that position for what seems like an eternity because his balance is so good, or he can just sit there on his left foot, pivoting it to just slightly different angles that if another player tried to do that, would either land them on the floor or in an ortho operating room. But then he's so smooth loading his right foot with that quick internal rotation or pushing your foot in that he can then beat you with power. It's not flashy, but biomechanically, it is wickedly efficient. It's like a drummer doing completely different things with both hands. It's smooth, it's effortless, but if you're really not watching, you kind of miss the whole setup of it. And speaking of that setup, even when he's just going to drive, right? He's never like squared up to the rim with that right foot. It's almost always slightly internally rotated at some odd angle when he's coming down and hitting the floor, because that naturally gets a defender leaning. But once again, he's so smooth with it, he can still go really anywhere he wants from any of those positions. It reminds me of Pete Sampras in the tennis space at his peak. When he tossed the ball up to serve, it would look exactly the same. But from that same toss, that same position, he could hit any spin, any direction, any speed he wanted. Nobody could read it because that technique was so smooth. That setup gave nothing away. D'Lo is the same way with his feet. The only difference is that Sampras could beat you with, pure serve speed. D'Lo is usually beating you with technique, with balance, and efficiency. Yeah, he can turn on the jets when he needs to, but more often than not, he is outsmarting you with mechanics. I get really animated when talking about biomechanics. I get way too excited. But, all right, so all that being said about Russell's footwork, is the D'Lo 1 a good match for that footwork style, knowing, all we know about it now? I think yeah, but so are a lot of other shoes. From 30,000 feet, the thing about the D'Lo 1 to me that is the most like one-to-one with the actual player is that it feels like an 808, but in the body of her traditional mid-soled shoes. It retains the same freedom of movement that like a drop-in shoe like the 808 has, but with just a bit more stability. So in terms of the uppers, the uppers they're contained. They got a nice lightweight TPU mesh go all the way around there. It does have this lateral stabilizer here that is really nice because it goes into the midsole, then it comes up into the rear foot. Then it also helps reinforce the lateral flange. I really like that. The thing is this is very flexible. It is a lot more flexible than some other shoes that have more rigid plastic in terms of lateral stabilizer. So that does play into more of that smoothness of his footwork. And that kind of comes up around the midsole underneath where the tread is. That goes up on the medial side. So you are getting some medial stability from these uppers too. The containment on these in terms of heel slippage is actually really good. If you're someone that likes, like I said, being able to kind of rock back and forth and make a ton of adjustments, yeah, you're probably gonna like that like Russell does. In terms of outsole tread, I've said this countless times. It does not matter what it is as long as it's multi-directional. But I will say it's got the same consistent traction of most Wave Weight shoes, so it's not inherently bad for him. It is not the only tread that would work. Anything that allows easy pivoting and subtle motion would be good. Just gotta think thin, wider gap tread with a mix of some bending arcs and then hard angles, which actually, yeah, this does have in spades. I think more like flat treads like the JB3 Wave Weight 11 would be a little bit more of a mismatch there. Although you do see plenty of players playing with similar footwork with those flat tread patterns, I just don't think it's as good of a match for that kind of footwork. The other nice thing with these is it does have a full length tread pattern, which obviously is going to give him, a lot of grip in a lot of different angles. There is a ton of channels through here, so they are going to get up off of step pretty easy. They're going to transition very easily, which he does do. And it has that really, really far posterior rocker. So because he is on that left foot, right, and it is externally rotating and planting all over the place, this will actually give quite a bit of freedom in those directions. So I do think for his plant foot, for that left foot, these are pretty much an ideal match. But getting into, if the midsole matches that type of game, although I do think that the one individual component of this shoe that is the most one-to-one with Russell is the outsole tread configuration. The midsole, I think, is pretty interesting. Now, checking out the diving board effect of this shoe and the stiffness, it only takes about 44 newtons to get this thing to 45 degrees. So, it does allow a lot more flexibility, and that is something he really, I think, wants because, like I said, he's spending so much time pivoting and moving and being very deliberate with his footwork instead of just, being like a bull in a china shop, right, and just running right through people or just trying to get speed for speed's sake. He's super deliberate, very craftsman-like work. So being able to get that little more flexibility is really nice, and these things do have that Pro Bar lock, which a lot of times it makes Wave Weight shoes very stiff, right, just depending on the materials they use. This one is pretty, it's a very different, which I think is pretty cool. Plus you get the Light Foam Ultra, which is that TPE, but the bubbles of that TPE and the Light Foam Ultra, so what they say is they're more dense and more regular, so those gas bubbles are more lined up, so there's less dead space, so it makes the midsole lighter. So these only come in at 13.15 ounces for a men's size 11. So they are lighter shoes. The containment is still there, but there's flexibility, right? It's not like an ultra containing shoe. There is a lot of movement there. So I think in terms of, also it's got boom foam, so you're gonna get a little more of that pop just from the foam. To me, yes, this is a great match for that footwork. You definitely can tell there was some thought into what his actual biomechanics were when they made this shoe. And if you want to make your footwear as one-to-one with your individual footwork as the D'Lo one is to D'Angelo Russell's footwork, make sure you check out my brand new shoe customization and lower leg taping ebook. It is all about all of my techniques I have learned over the last decade of customizing shoes, basketball, tennis, pickleball, running, whatever, to make them as custom one-to-one player exclusives as possible using very inexpensive materials at home. So if you don't have a brand like Li-Ning or Wave Weight to make you your own shoe and you want to do it right in the comfort of your own home, check that book out. I'll leave it linked in the description below. So love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Also love to know if you think your footwork's a match for that, or if you ever noticed that kind of stuff about his footwork, or you think I missed anything about his footwork, let me know in the comments down below. And speaking of all the insane footwork I just talked about with D'Angelo Russell, if you do want to see kind of another side to it, completely different type of footwork that ultimately I think led to Jason Tatum's Achilles rupture, and how to prevent you from getting the same thing, or same thing happening to you, make sure you click into this video up above, subscribe down below. Respect, rubber, and foam. I'll see you in that video.